officially begin day 2 of the interviews for regions for the state New York Board of Regents. Okay, we had a wonderful day yesterday introducing a bunch of people, and we welcome first time today somebody we've welcomed before, Regent Patrick Mannion, who is his term has expired and is applying again to be reseated. Regent Mannion, we thank you for coming today. As if you remember, we give you a little time to introduce yourself to us. Not that you need to, but you can say whatever you like for a few minutes, and then we'll ask the board here to ask you a few questions. Okay? So with that, sir, I think you know everybody at the table, but let me just mention, I'm Assemblyman Mike Benedetto, Chairman of the Assembly Education Committee. To my right, going down the table, we have the chairperson of the Assembly Higher Education Committee, Ms. Assemblywoman Hyman. Then we have a couple of senators. First, Senator Shelley Mayer, who is the Senate Education Chairperson. And next to her, we have Senator Toby Stavinsky, who is the chairperson of their Senate Higher Ed Committee. To my left, I have one of my colleagues in the State Assembly, Assemblyman Bill Magnarelli, and coming in to join us at the table is the ranker on the Assembly Education Committee, Assemblyman Doug Smith. Thank you, Doug. So at any rate, I'll stop my fumbling around and pass it on to you. The floor is yours, Mr. Regent.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Thank you, Chair. And I'll go down and thank Chair Hyman, Chair Mayer, Chair Stavisky, also a proud Syracuse University alum. We have more Syracuse University alum, I think, in this part of the room, Assemblyman Magnarelli, and Syracuse is one of my degrees as well. And Assemblyman Smith, thank you for joining us again. You had the best question when I was here 2 years ago when you asked, why in the name of heaven would you elect me to be a regent when I had no idea what I was doing in education? And I said, I don't know, what's a good answer? If you don't mind, what I'll do is spend a couple minutes just talking about my experience in the last 2 years. I'll thank you again for allowing me to do it for the last 2 years. Hopefully allow me to do it for the next 5 or whatever the plan may be. I was talking to Assemblyman Magnarelli before I came in, and I said, one thing I have learned is a far better appreciation for what you do as legislators. The agenda for education, no matter where you go or what it is wide, broad, and deep, and understanding it is never easy. Keeping up with it is never easy, and balancing that, if I were you, balancing this along with the 10 million other priorities that you have, I'm not quite sure how you do it. And governing should not be easy, especially in a democracy, but I'm not so sure it should be that hard either. So I want to thank you for what you do. I've learned a lot about what goes on in education across the state. And I know you have some really big things to deal with, some of which don't necessarily impact upstate New York, like mayoral control. But I understand mayoral control is something very important to a big part of us all. Foundation aid is obviously important to everybody. Universal pre-K, I applaud that and hope that we can have some real progress as we go forward. And what little I may be able to do, I really look forward to doing that. When I joined 2 years ago, when I joined the board, I promised primarily Assemblywoman Butenshan that I would get out and spend time in the district. And my judicial district spans 6 counties, thousands of square miles, 71 school districts. We have, I think I have 4 or 5 component BOCES as well. And I have done my level best to get out and meet every one of the superintendents, go to all of the school districts and the BOCES. And my purpose has been to learn from, listen to, and have a dialogue with the people who do this for a living. And it's been primarily at the pre-K through 12 level. I've visited a number of the colleges as well. I would say that it's something I need to spend more time with. I need to spend more time with cultural resources. But in the past 2 years, primary ed was where I spent my time. And I want to just share a couple of things that I think are important to me going forward for the next period of time. New York Inspires, the portrait of a graduate, the new graduation measures. Everywhere I go, people are excited about it, and there is some legitimate trepidation. I think the big question we have is how can we, the department, expeditiously roll out, for want of a better phrase, what a definition of success is, and how can we as a department help districts prepare for developing and maintaining academic rigor across the idea of education, which is much different from Horace Mann's test-based rigor. So, and I think we also, as a department and as a state, we are going to have to deal with how we ramp up to provide so much more experiential learning. I'm not sure we quite have our hands around that. Foundation aid, obviously people are pleased that the governor has started the negotiations where she has. I do think, though, and we had a conversation with the speaker not long ago where I made the comment that in Albany, when you do one thing 1 year, you don't necessarily want to go back and do it again. So, foundation aid last year, a lot of progress, but I'm here to tell you that in many districts, especially in many districts where I represent them, the need for funding is always going to be there. So I'm not suggesting we always have to have more money, but I do think we have to recognize that there are going to be a number of districts that have legitimate and very real financial challenges, some of which, not all, but some of which can be helped through changes to foundation aid. The department has done a lot of work in helping districts talk to each other and look at what we can do cooperatively. I have a little note here that says don't say regionalization, because that has, especially where Assemblyman Smith is, that has some negative connotations. But what's coming out of that work are real initiatives that districts can do together, many initiatives that they're already doing, but even more, and I think, frankly, look at regulation and legislation that we either can change or remove or just make better. Reading, and more reading. What I have really come to appreciate in the last 2 years is that reading is as important as I thought it was, and I have 6 children. It's even more important in my mind now. In Syracuse, you may or may not know, Syracuse has a long and storied history in reading. Ruth Colvin just recently passed away. She was over 100. She was, and literacy volunteers were pioneers in that area. Dr. Maria Murray and the Reading League is doing data-based, science-based work on the science of reading that is recognized nationally and around the world. We have a reading program called Book Buddies, which is high-impact tutoring with volunteers. I think we now have it in 6 or 7 schools run through the United Way. And I'll simply say that what I have learned is that poverty does not cause illiteracy. Illiteracy causes poverty. And I'm convinced after spending time with the people who do it professionally, we can teach every child how to read, and we should. If I get to 3rd grade and I can't read at 3rd grade level, my challenges are going to be significantly greater than they are for everybody else. We have to teach every child how to read. Electric vehicles, I have a great answer for electric vehicles, and I get asked about it everywhere I go, and that is it's not my job. It's legislation, and you need to have a conversation with your elected officials. My observation is that every superintendent and everywhere that I find myself, people are fully willing to embrace the idea of environmentally appropriate transportation. They are confounded by the financial, the infrastructure, the realities of purchasing buses, and the realities of getting power. And those, I would just say to you, as agnostically as I can, those realities very much make it difficult to meet the time frame that is in the current legislation. I'm going to finish up with just some comments about my experience. And I want to step away from the din of our current discourse. Debate is what makes our country a great country. I think the value of stepping back, at least for me, is to remind myself of why we do what we do and why what we do is necessary and imperative. And then dive back into the din and the debate and hopefully the respectful give and take that brings us to better decisions. Amongst the Board of Regents, in the State Education Department, the term all means all is a guiding light. Every child, every person deserves an equal opportunity as best we can provide it to succeed. You know, DEI has become a lightning rod in our dialogue. I'm not frankly sure for all the reasons. In my view, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a fundamental cornerstone of the experiment that we call the United States of America. Since its inception, maybe especially at its inception, we are imperfect, but we are also aspirational, and that makes us aspirational. I take an oath as a regent. I take an oath every year as a firefighter and an EMT. You take an oath that's very similar when you are sworn in. I do solemnly swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York, and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of my office to the best of my abilities. In order to do that, when we talk about Portrait of a Graduate and having children and become adults and become productive members of society, they become productive members of this discourse, I have to recognize that oath as I go through my own decision-making and my observations. Aristotle said that there is no freedom without virtue, that there is a certain kind of education that children must be given, not because it is useful or necessary, but because it is noble and suitable for a free person. I firmly believe that is as true today as it was 2,400 years ago. I recognize the moment that we are in, along with the duties that I willingly take on and you take on. And again, I want to thank you for giving me the chance to do this work.
Regent Mannion, thank you very much for that. Quite interesting. Are you running for office someplace?
I hear dog catchers available in Onondaga
Magnarelli
County.
be worried here? We thank you for that, sir, and we're glad you're here. Let us start the questioning with my colleague, Senator. Oh, before I say that, let me say we've been joined by Long Island, Senator Bino, and we welcome you. Please, Senator Mayer.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for such thoughtful remarks and your willingness to sort of jump into the regions head first, as you have, and you described it. I appreciate your making the effort to see different schools. On the Portrait of a Graduate, I appreciate that you said, I took it as you are sort of optimistic, but there's trepidation. Can you describe the nature of the trepidation that you hear? Is that from superintendents, from parents, or what group is expressing it, and how do you think the regions should address that?
So thank you, Senator. I think I hear different things from different constituencies or different groups of people. On the parent side, I think there's still some just confusion about you're getting rid of the Regents exams. Right. So that's another thing that I have to answer pretty much everywhere I go, and I would imagine most of my fellow Regents have similar experiences. With the professional educators, the superintendents, what I hear is there's an excitement about it. I think the shift to experiential learning or the broadening of experiential learning as legitimate ways to get a high school diploma, and then pushing that all the way down to pre-K, I think they are rejuvenated by that. I think that's giving everybody a new perspective on the work that they are doing. The trepidation for them, and this is a non-educator's summary of a lot of different conversations, the trepidation for them that I hear is, how do you define success? So if you want me to go off and do pilot programs, you want me to go off and do whatever it is, how do I know that I'm not going down the wrong path? And a lot of what the department is working on, and we have a lot of conversations about whether or not we can work on it faster, or when I bring up working on it faster, they kind of laugh at me and say, you know, you can't do it. I say that you started the Blue Ribbon Commission in 2019, so by the time you roll it out, it's been 10 years. I do think we need to be quicker in how we do it and how we empower the 670 active districts that we have in implementing their own programs with our guidelines. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, it did. Thank you. On the districts within your district that are in the Save Harmless category and under the governor's proposal would only get 1% more in foundation aid, your suggestion was they have costs basically that exceed a 1% growth, I take it. The majority of the school districts in your district are in that category, I would assume.
I don't know the number, but the answer is yes.
Okay, and have you proposed, I know the Board of Regents proposed a higher number on the Save Harmless. Beyond that proposal, is there anything further the regions are doing to stress that districts actually need more than the 1%?
Well, I can only speak for myself. I don't know that the department has taken on an organized approach to advocating for individual districts and their funding. The idea of changing foundation aid, and I know you have spoken to a couple of the areas that should be changed. And there are others as well. I couldn't tell you if there is real work on individual districts. I can tell you, I'll share one quick story, because it made a point with me. Sitting with a superintendent, with 8 superintendents from Onondaga County and Cayuga County, and we were just talking about stuff. And one of the superintendents was decidedly agitated while we were talking about other stuff. And I think we had just finished talking about buses. And he leans into the table and he says, look, I don't care about buses. He said, I'm worried about keeping the lights on. And he goes through this rendition of all the issues he has. And so I said, so tell me, how are you paying the bills if you don't have the money? And he tells me, and I believe him, they have scrap. They take their desks and they break them. They come in on weekends and they break them. They sell it for scrap. I said, so you're cannibalizing your school district in order to be able to, pay teachers. Now that's, I'm sure, mildly hyperbolic, but for them it's very real. And the other thing I would say is, in dealing with the superintendents in particular and principals, another story, I was up in the North Country with a superintendent who offered to buy me a sandwich. So I went in, I had a sandwich, he closed the door, he spent 20 minutes railing at me about stuff, legitimate frustrations. I don't think any of it was terrible. He finally stopped and he said, look, he said, forget all that. He said, no matter what you do, no matter what hurdles you throw up, no matter what our challenges are, we will figure it out. And I hear that over and over and over again in the education environment, because they don't have options.
Thank you. Appreciate, and I really do appreciate your passion for the work of being a regent. Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblywoman Hyman.
Thank you, Regent Mannion. You have 6 counties and 71 school districts. And I know New York City seems like it's a lot, but I know each county outside of the city of New York has a lot of challenges, and the fact that you have 6 of them very different from each other is very interesting. So I just want to focus a bit on Onondaga, Syracuse Public Schools, because of the ratings over the years and the needs that they have. And in your capacity as a region, and I know you're Chair of Budget and Finance, and only 2 years you're heading up a rather big committee for the regions. What can you say for Syracuse Public Schools are the main issues that you've seen, not heard, because you live in Onondaga County? What are the main issues, and how do you think as a region, being allowed to continue your work to help alleviate some of those issues that public school district has faced and will face?
Thank you, Chairman Hyman. First, I would say that I'm not the chair of the Budget and Finance. I am the chair of the Audit Committee, which I think also includes Budget and Finance. And I'm still learning that. But to your question directly, as you know, or probably know, we had a changeover in leadership at the school district. Tony Davis, who had stepped in for the last 4 years, was replaced by Superintendent Pam Odom, who I've just spent some time with last week. I was telling Chairman Benedetto before we started the meeting, I began my career when I got out of college working for the Syracuse City School District in their business office. So I spent 2 years there, and it was a great experience. I have a soft spot in my heart for the district, and I think there are a couple things that I would say about the issues that they have. First, as a traditional urban district, it's got traditional urban issues. And those aren't going to go away anytime soon. And the district does, I think, a pretty good job of addressing the areas that they can address and doing the best they can to work with the rest of the community to address the issues that can't be taken care of inside their four walls. I believe that firmly. I think you look at the initiatives they have with CTE. I think you look at what they have with the STEAM school, which is, we have a lot to thank Albany for to be enjoying that, a lot to thank Assemblymember Magnarelli for that, and for other members who advocated for it. $70+ million project that is now off and running. Where I can help with that, I think, and I've spent time on it in the last couple of weeks, I met with the superintendent. My interest right now is how are we doing in filling the classrooms with the magnet school concept. So when STEAM School was proposed and rolled out last year, the idea was we'll have 2/3 be students from within the district and 1/3 be students from outside within the BOCES region. And I don't think we quite made that, and I think there are some things that we probably can help them do that would help with enrollment that are just, I think, simple, nothing simple. Every action has an equal and, sometime unintended reaction. But I think there are some things that we can do to help them better fill the classrooms with students from outside of the district, which helps them not just with diversity, but also helps them with their financial planning and meeting the needs that school has. I think the school district for, it's 40 some odd schools. It is 18,000 students. It's 6,000 employees. It's a big, big industry business, and I think Superintendent Odom is up for the challenge. And I think, as I said, we do a lot of things really well. And I also think that some of that just gets lost because it isn't the things you do well that end up in the newspapers. It's everything else.
It's the same with us in our jobs, too. So.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Senator Stravinsky.
Thank you, Regent, for your comments. And yes, I am a proud SU alum and did my student teaching at T. Aaron Levy Junior High School, which I understand has now closed.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It became Levy Junior High, and I believe it's closed. Is that
I
right?
believe it's closed. I had nothing to do with that. I was there a long time ago. During your approximate two-year tenure as a regent, and visiting the schools, I think, is a really significant act. It shows a willingness to become familiar with people in a classroom, frankly. What have you have you had any misconceptions corrected? What has been your feeling during your 2 years? What have you accomplished, and what do you see as the future of not just the Syracuse School District, but the various, it's not just elementary schools, incidentally, because the regents have oversight over the whole area of not just the colleges and universities, as you know, but also the professions that are licensed by the State Education Department. But what has been your, any misconceptions that have been corrected, and what are you proudest of?
What am I proudest of? I made it through 2 years without anybody, locking the door and not letting me back in. Let me answer it a couple of different ways. Let's talk about higher ed for a minute. I have spent time with the Syracuse University folks, with Lemoyne. I have relationships there that predate my becoming a regent, Upstate Medical University, and so on. And I've made myself available. And I think, Chair, the accomplishment that I have had is that I have made myself available. And I have become, I think, a good advocate, not necessarily a totally compelling advocate, because I'm not that smart, at least quite yet, but there isn't a single district, or frankly, educational institution of any kind that doesn't have the ability to call me. On my card, I have my cell phone number, and I give it to them, and I say, use it. It has my regent's email and my private email. I think that if I can be of any help to them, being present is a big part of it. I will also say that I wish I could tell you I had some magnificent success that I could put on my tombstone. Maybe there's somebody who'll grow up to invent a cure from cancer that I may have impressed, but short of that, I don't think that kind of progress has happened under my watch, at least not yet, but incrementally, better understanding. I think I have a good working relationship with the Department of with the State Education Department, with my fellow regents, who are also very important to what goes on around the state. What am I surprised by? I am surprised that almost without exception, and I'll say almost without exception because everybody has a dud here or there, but almost without exception, I have been very impressed by the people who are educating our children in particular. I am very impressed by the leadership. Again, there's a few duds, but almost without exception, very impressed with the leadership, superintendents, college presidents, administrators. When I go into buildings, principals, as you know, as a teacher or as an educator, you can tell an awful lot about a school principal by what goes on in that school. And I am very impressed by the people that I watch doing that work. And I'm also in many ways amazed that they can do it with the challenges that they have, whether they're rural, urban, suburban, everybody's got stuff. And the concept that whatever happens, we'll figure it out, I do think is a driving motto for virtually all of them.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr.
Assemblyman Magnarelli.
Thank you. And thank you, Regent Mannion. I'm only here not to ask you any questions. I'm just here to thank you, okay? Because the first time I talked to you about becoming a regent, I was very nervous that you were going to just get up and walk out and say, why would I want to do that? I don't even know what it entails. And I think that was one of the questions that you asked me. I just want you to know that from what I have heard within the district, your ability to talk to people, to get out there and visit the different districts within your district, your regent's district, makes a difference. And so I just wanted to be here to commend you on 2 years, and I'm so happy that you're here again to do a full term. And I appreciate everything that you've done for our district, and I wish you the best.
Thank you, Assemblyman. I appreciate that.
It was very nice of you, Mr. Magnarelli. You're a good man.
See, it's hard. I do say nice things about
Yes, I know. You hide it well, though.
And now I have to.
please.
I have to run to talk about absenteeism.
If you don't know, one of the Assemblyman's favorite topics.
And allowing us to move on to the ranker on the Education Committee, Assemblyman Smith.
Thank you, and thank you, Regent Mannion. And I have to say, 2 years ago when we sat here, I wasn't, because I had not a pointed question, but I was wondering with your breadth of experience and knowledge, similar to what Chair Magnarelli had just mentioned, not that you couldn't do the job, but wondering what your passion would be driving you to do that. And I have to say, I was proven right in a sense that knowing you would do a fantastic job, but wrong in a sense that I didn't understand it. Now I do understand it. So seeing you sit here and listening to what you're recounting, it makes perfect sense why someone who, your background as a volunteer firefighter, it makes sense why you'd want to go that extra mile. So I also appreciate what you're saying about the New York Inspires and Portrait of a Graduate. I think I'm hearing similar things on Long Island. Regionalization you mentioned, maybe not a Long Island topic, but I think you rightly point out that districts working together and trying to share expenses and resources is a hallmark of how upstate New York, downstate we call it everything upstate, but central New York, western New York, the North Country, Capital Region, that these are some features that are working well or working. You mentioned literacy and the importance there. I think that's really key. Chronic absenteeism. Chair Benedetto hosted a hearing about 3 weeks ago on that topic. What are you hearing when you speak to districts about what we can do, what you can do on the Regents to, I don't know if it inspires students to show up to school, but, what can we do there?
I don't have a compendium of things that will fix the absenteeism issue. I think we've gotten, in my 2 years, we being the state ed, and I think a lot of the districts that I'm most familiar with have gone a long way in understanding what chronic absenteeism is, have gone a long way in understanding things that they can do to move the needle. But I will also say I think moving the needle is hard. And we make progress, but, and it's a big but, I don't think anybody stands around and says, oh, gee whiz, this is great. It was 62% last year, and now it's 66%, let's have a parade. Getting children into schools has an obvious impact on the success in those schools. One thing I will also say that I have learned is the after-school programs. When I went into this and I was told about how great esports were, and I'm like, really? Sitting in my basement in my pajamas playing whatever it is I'm playing?
Video games, esports.
Yeah, esports, video games. And then I went out and spent times in schools where they have esport programs. And the question I ask when I go to schools is, how does your after-school program, whether it's esports or regular whatever, FFA, for example, things like that, that really grab the interest of students, it gets them to school and it keeps them there. Because that's the first question I ask is, can I go home and play, whatever the game is in my basement? And they're, no, you got to be here. It's a good rule.
My time's expired, but thank you. You're doing a great job. We're hearing good things. Thank you.
Senator Bino.
Good morning.
Morning.
So I came in midstream, and I'm not sure if one of my favorite topics were discussed. So I'm going to ask you a little bit about charter schools. So I'm in a district that has a proliferation of charter schools, and we understand that parents want, options, and we know that charter schools can play a role in that. I'm interested to know how what's the impact of charter schools on the public schools to which you serve within your jurisdiction?
Thank you, Senator, for that easy question. My experience with charter schools, it depends on who you ask, right? So from an administrative standpoint, especially in the city of Syracuse, and I think the charter schools, I think the charter schools in Onondaga County, I think are all in the city. I think it's very difficult for the city to watch that revenue go away and not be able to use it, period. And I get that. I think from the labor standpoint, it's very similar. if you take whatever it is and give it to a different institution, then I don't have it for my priorities. I think that frustration is real. I think beyond just how that financial hit is dealt with, I'm not sure that I have an answer for what the effect is.
Schools in your district are laying off staff, consolidating programs,
This is an
closing schools.
Yeah, this is an uneducated answer. The answer to that, I think, is no.
Okay.
The charter school impact, at least in the city of Syracuse, and the best of my knowledge, and we have charter schools in other counties, not a lot of them, but we have a few. To the best of my knowledge, they haven't caused any significant delivery changes by the host districts.
Okay. And as an authorizer, along with SUNY, when you look at these applications from the perspective as a regent, are there gaps where you think we might tighten up the review process so that we might take in consideration the impacts in the event that there are on the public schools?
I'm not sure that I have a good answer for that in particular. I do think, from my perspective, I am a little bit perplexed by the charter school approvals and the difference between the state ed department and SUNY. And I asked this question at the last board meeting, which was a few weeks ago, where when we review the charter, we being the department, goes through its process. And then if the charter's been approved by SUNY and it comes to us as the Board of Regents saying we don't believe we should be authorizing this, so we're sending it back to SUNY to review. My understanding is, I think there is a subcommittee of the board, I think, that looks at it, but not the full board. And if it makes a difference or not, the full Board of the Regents reviews all the work that is done on charter authorizations and all the work that is done on what comes to us from SUNY. And my understanding is, I think it goes back to SUNY. I'm not sure that there's any real changes that are made, and then it just becomes a charter school. So I don't really understand that. That's one of the things, especially after the last meeting, that I want to better understand and appreciate. I don't think I'm quite answering your question, but I'm raising my one charter school observation.
Okay, that's fair. Thank you.
Regent Mannion, we want to thank you for being here today, and you have a busy schedule, and you took time out to be here, and we thank you for your work. You have served the last 2 years on the Regents, and we will certainly take your application into sincere consideration, and we will let you know within the next week or so what we have decided here today.
Yeah, let me know before I don't want to drive if I don't have to.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much for your time. I
Regent
appreciate
Mannion,
it.
thank you.
Chair Benedetto, look forward to pitchers and catchers showing up in 2 weeks. Things
There
will
we
get
go.
better. Thank you.
Ms. Shari Kamhi, am I pronouncing that right? Kamhi?
You are. You're one of few that can do that.
Good. Please, relax, sit down. I'm Assemblyman Mike Benedetto, and I'm chair of the Assembly Education Committee, and I am joined at the table with, on my right, Right, Assemblywoman Alicia Hyman, who is Chair of the Higher Education Committee, Senator Toby Stavitsky, who's Chairwoman of the Senate Higher Education Committee, and lastly at this table, Senator Sela Bino. Is that right, Sela? Right. Okay. And to my left, I have Assemblyman Doug Smith, who is the ranker on the Assembly Education Committee. We welcome you here today. We're glad you've applied. It's kind of an informal process here, so we want you just to sit back and relax, take some time, okay? 5 minutes have been allotted, but doesn't have to be that long. Tell us about yourself. Tell us why you've applied for the Regents and maybe what you expect out of it. Just give us a feeling for yourself, and after which we'll ask you some questions, okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. At your leisure, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to interview for the at-large Regents position. I proudly share that I am a New York City born and raised graduate of Lincoln High School and Brooklyn College, and first-generation college graduate. I started my career as a special education teacher in District 75 and eventually John Dewey High School. I remain in touch with my fifth grade teacher, Mr. Coriel, who I speak to, and he changed the trajectory of my life. As well, I am in touch with a student of mine from John Dewey High School. His name is Chris, and he would share with you that equally I made a difference in his life. I'm a proud mom of 2 grown and married children who reside in New York City. My daughter-in-law is a New York City teacher. What drives me are experiences I had as a student, a teacher, and a parent, watching children navigate school. I witnessed uniqueness and creativity turn into compliance, and I believe we can do better. Our schools should reflect the future, not the past. I say that not as a criticism, but as a call to action for more active, future-focused thinking. I'm very proud of the school system we built in Baldwin. Very proud of the school system. A district of almost 5,000 students, of which 50% are Black, 35% Hispanic, 10% white, 4% mixed race, and 1% Asian. We boast a continuous graduation rate between 97 and 99%, and the carrot on the top, a 0% achievement gap. The only area where we had any difference was in our students with severe disabilities, our 811 program, and those are students who will not take or pass Regents exams. While I'm exceedingly proud of this accomplishment, what makes me most proud are the programs we designed for students of Baldwin. We recognize the need to make learning relevant and align the demands of an ever-changing future world of work. Rigor is high, programs demanding, but they are relevant, meaningful, and are deeply aligned to the newest New York State initiatives. I firmly believe every child, regardless of zip code, should have access to learning opportunities like those we built in Baldwin, unique to the needs, desires, and economic opportunities defined locally, but which guarantee success and prosperity for all. The ability to turn practice into policy is a natural next step for me. That is why I'm here today. I will share as well that Speaker Hasty was in our district last year, and I have to admit, he put the idea in my head. He actually said the words, "You should become a regent." I have had the honor of serving as AASA President, the National Superintendents Association, and currently serve as the Superintendent Representative on the National Assessment Governing Board. Like the rest of the nation, New York is diverse demographically and geographically. My New York State colleagues face similar challenges to those around the country. Issues range from addressing student mental health to ensuring equitable access to high-quality education and developing programs that provide visionary, state-of-the-art opportunity for all learners. With creative thinking and collaboration, no issue is insurmountable. There is an amazing network of talented educators and leaders across our state. We need to take advantage of creative ideas that might already exist, engage with each other to develop novel and meaningful approaches, and develop policies that encourage innovation and transformation. New York has always been the best of the best. At this moment in time, with Portrait of a Graduate and New York Inspires, we are poised to enter a new phase of innovation regarding the programs we offer our students. While AASA president, I hosted the first ever Future of Learning Summit with natural figures in K-12 higher ed, industry, and policy leaders. We envisioned what would be possible if all sectors had a common vision, collaborated, and worked together for the benefit of our students. As a Regent at large, I would be honored to work with the Commissioner, Chancellor, and Board of Regents to bring together leaders in these areas to envision what is possible and needed for next generation learning. I believe the voice of the superintendency is critical in these discussions and policy decisions. When we focus on the future and collaborate on opportunities that are forward-thinking, all students in New York State benefit. In fact, we all benefit because their future is our future. Thank you again for the opportunity. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. We thank you for coming. We thank you for your nice, concise opening statement. I just want to say before we go on, we have been joined at the table by Assemblywoman Griffith and Assemblywoman Buttonschone, and we thank you both for joining us. Let us begin with Assemblywoman Alicia Hyndman.
Good morning, Dr. Kami. So you retired from the Baldwin School District last year?
August 1st.
And you want to do free work as a regent? So being that you're a lifelong educator, being on the Board of Regents, you have oversight over 7,000 public and private kindergarten through 12th grade schools, over 250 public and private colleges. It's a very large undertaking of work setting policy for the entire state of New York. And you have a background in education. So statewide, what do you see as the main issues that are facing children and adults in New York State? And I'm including the colleges and universities in this question also. That's my first question. And my second question is, out of the committees that are on the Board of Regents, which committee would you be interested in serving on?
So I would say in terms of priorities, one area I think we've not addressed at all is making sure all of our students are news and media literate before they graduate. In Baldwin, we integrated news and media literacy in a partnership with Stony Brook University in their Center for News and Media Literacy for all 6th through 12th graders in ELA and social studies. So we built the curriculum in conjunction with Stony Brook. They provided the professional development for our teachers. I will say there is no doubt that my kids that graduate know the difference between real and fake information. I know that because I talk to them after they've graduated. And so that is one area I'm very proud of, and I think that's a skill that 100% of our students, not only K-12, but in higher ed, need to have. So that's one priority. Clearly, making sure that our kids in literacy and math are at least above the proficiency level, if not higher than that. That is an area that we need to focus on. I think we need to focus on AI. We need to take a step back and really have a conversation about that. What are the implications for that? How do we manage that? Innovation is huge for me. It is not 1970, it's 2026. So in Baldwin, we had an initiative called Baldwin 2035. We started that more than 5 years ago, and we were looking at what should our students who graduate Baldwin in 2035, what should their experience have been, and what skills should they have when they graduate in 2035. Finally, I think in terms of higher ed, I think we need to do a better job at collaborating K-12 to 13, 16, and really bridging those programs, again, of which we've done in Baldwin. We've done a lot of that work. In terms of committees, I'd be happy to sit on, obviously, the K-12 committee and the higher ed committee, because I think those two are linked.
Thank you.
You know, I'm impressed, okay? You go right down to the wire there, but you're done, and you have complete thought. That's,
Superintendents
you're
don't
showing
talk
me
that
something
much,
here.
do they?
Okay. Senator Stravitsky.
Thanks. I agree with the Assemblyman concerning, we're used to that in a classroom. We know that the bell is going to ring, and that's the qualities, obviously, one of the qualities. But you have an incredible background, and I thank you for your service, particularly to the children of New York City, because I represent a district in New York City. But the region, obviously, at large, covers all of the state of New York. How would you bring your very complete and background and your experiences to the other 60-some-odd counties of New York State in terms of setting education policy? And let me add just one other thing. I'm impressed by the fact that you are a graduate of CUNY because CUNY and SUNY, as well as the 2 or so hundred independent colleges, are very important to New York State, particularly in training young people. How would you bring your very varied background to the entire state in terms of policy issues?
Sure. So, as AASA president, my responsibility was nationwide. That included rural schools, suburban schools, and city schools. The challenges that we face in New York City, the policy decisions we face in New York City, are not unlike the policy decisions that we face nationwide. I'm saying here that all of our students in New York State need to be news and media literate. Every single student around the country has to be news and media literate, and I continue to work on that. Because of my role in AASA, I have had tremendous opportunities to meet superintendents from around the country, but also our superintendents here. Some of my best friends, Verona Sherrill, she retired also, but she a very good friend of mine. Tarrytown, very good friend of mine. I think what will help me do this is that I have connections across the state. I'm doing work with CEI, the Center for Education Innovation, which is a New York City-based organization that's worked across the city. It has a big STEM school in the Bronx. And so I think, number one, the counties and the cities and the school districts need to know I'm there. So the first thing I would do is make sure that they knew that I was at large and I was available to them. The second is I would make sure that whatever the initiatives that I felt were important, that the state felt was important, that the chancellor and the commissioner felt were important, were shared with those school districts. I would just make myself available. I think that's what you have to do. I've served the country. New York State looks pretty small when you've worked across the country.
Thank you.
Sorry, I went over.
Oh, quite all right.
One demerit.
Quite all right. Ranker Smith.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Kami. This is our first time meeting, but for me, your reputation precedes yourself because I'm out in Suffolk County. We have a lot of people that we know in common that have spoken over the years about a lot of your good work. So it's an honor to meet you and have you be considered for this position. 2014 to 2025, you served as the superintendent of schools at Baldwin. You talked about a lot of the achievements that, again, Long Islanders know about because we're in the area, but how did you navigate through, you talk about the last 10 or 15 years, there's been such a change in education. I personally think we're on the right track. I think that when you became superintendent in 2014, the state was on the wrong track, in my opinion. Can you talk about that? Because you navigated the district through COVID, but also through a time where state ed was building a plane in the air, and it was, in my opinion, crashing pretty fast.
So I think I have a unique ability of not only seeing what's possible, seeing what's really good for kids, but being able to gather people who agree. And so I would say to you that particularly in Baldwin, our method was to kind of seed different ideas and see success and then build that. Our teachers are very excited about the work that we're doing. And, when we talk about innovation, we talk about students not being engaged, we have to talk about teachers as well. Teachers need to love to wake up in the morning and go to school every day, right? I don't think any teacher shows up wanting to fail, we know that, but they need to be revitalized. Like, we get beaten down all the time, and we need to build that back up. They need to love to come, and they need to feel the freedom to do things that are innovative and interesting. And so we built on that. I will tell you that I believe that I have the courage to do what other people are afraid to do. I believe that I have the ability to get people on board with that. When, in my involvement with AASA, we'd worked on something called Redefining Ready, which was very much looking at the standards that students should have before they graduate high school. And I went around the state sharing my version of Redefining Ready New York. That was before the state was doing it. And I think that we created a little bit of a drumbeat to say, it is possible to live in the existing system and to be able to do things differently, to create this amazing environment for children and for adults and for communities. Our community in Baldwin was 1,000% behind the work that we were doing. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody didn't show up at a board meeting once in a while, but I proudly say that in 11 years, we had 3 of those board meetings, right? And that's because we communicated it, we made sure that people knew what we were doing, we made sure we were successful in the work that we were doing, and then we built on the successes. And we were always looking forward and out to see what was possible next. I also don't give up very easily. So the partnership that we built with Nassau Community College, for example, took me more than 10 years to do. And they kept pushing me away, but I kept coming back because that's what's best for kids.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Bino.
Thank you. Dr. Kami, it's great to see you. I've long been a fan of your work, although I have not represented the Baldwin School District for a long, extended period of time while you were in service. I represented neighboring school districts, and I really love the work that you've been doing.
Thank you.
In particular, the workforce innovative approach to engaging students, along with the internships that your school district makes sure that they engage with local leaders, elected officials, business owners, to make sure that children have a practical learning experience. In fact, I have an intern in my office from Baldwin this session. I wanted to ask you, how would you parlay that experience as an educator, as a policymaker now, and would you take the approach of making sure, also this is a two-part question, how would you engage educators in the policy-making process?
So in terms of the academies, for example, that we built, the senior experience class that we created, I firmly believe, and my district firmly believes, that as much learning happens outside of school as does inside of school. What I found is that when you engage both adults and students in the area of civics, everyone gets excited. And so it became a real initiative for us to make sure that our students had experiences outside of school, engaging not only with local leaders, but businesses, having experiences that they would not otherwise have. We firmly believe that when students graduate high school, they should not only know what they don't want to do, as well as what they do want to do, right? We save a ton of money when our kids graduate and have an idea of what they want to do post-graduation from high school. And so we really engaged in that. Again, we built that up. I would say that as a policymaker, what I would hope for so that we can make sure this happens in other districts throughout the state, particularly New York City, which has unbelievable resources that I think we don't take enough advantage of. I would want us as policymakers to engage with the business community. You're going to inherit our kids when they graduate high school or when they inherit graduate from college. You want the best of the best of the best, and you need to take part in creating that best. And so I would want us to, as policymakers, to begin to engage with the business community in all the areas of the state. Where is the local economy? Where are we building? Syracuse, for example, has a whole chip manufacturing industry now, right? So how do we identify what currently exists, what could exist, connect schools with industry, connect schools with higher ed, and make sure that as policymakers, we support that work?
Assemblywoman Griffin.
Oh, sorry. I had the privilege of working with Dr. Kami for years, and I got to see firsthand the innovative and dynamic programs that brought Baldwin students forward. And I got to see the students themselves. They volunteer to intern, they volunteer throughout the areas in Baldwin, and it's so impressive. And I really appreciate that you want to bring this experience, your exemplary experience, forward to volunteer in our state to really help us through the many challenges we have in education. So I don't have enough time to ask you everything I'd want to ask, but one thing I really would like to know about, because I know you've experienced this as a Baldwin superintendent, is how do we address some of the biggest cost drivers? Of course, that's transportation, special ed, and construction, insurance, but in particular, we have the cost of charter schools. And in the suburban schools, it's our taxpayer dollars. It's the residents of each school district that pay taxes, and that tuition, it's diverted to pay for charter school tuition and charter school transportation. And I know Baldwin's been negatively impacted, and much more districts are continually, those costs are rising. So that is my question.
So thank you for that question. I want to start by saying I'm all in favor of school choice. The question for me is accountability, the finances, and making sure that academically we're holding everybody to the same standard. So I would want us to look at methods of funding. I'd want us to be transparent. I would want there to be one single authorizer of charter schools. The equivalent to me is sort of me being in charge of a healthcare system. I'm pretty sure you don't want me in charge of a healthcare system, right? K-12 is K-12, and so the people who oversee K-12, the state education department, should be overseeing all of the schools that service kids in K-12. You referenced Baldwin. We know that charter schools are prevalent in certain communities. They are targeted, those communities. But in addition to that, what we're seeing this now, and for Baldwin, it's been for at least 3 to 5 years, we've seen this change. So in the 24-25 school year, Baldwin spent in excess of $1.5 million for students to go to charter schools when our graduation rate was 99%. You cannot explain that to me. And so I think there's a lot of work that we need to do. I think we need to hold charter schools to the same accountability measures. I think there needs to be transparency financially. And I think that we need to make sure that there's accountability. So I would want state ed to be the single authorizer. I would want us to get a better handle on the finances here. I think they need to be funded differently. There is no reason why Baldwin should be paying for kids to go outside of Baldwin schools.
Thank you. I completely agree.
Thank you. And Ms. Button-Schoen to close.
Hello, Doctor. Thank you for your interest, as it is clearly something that is commendable, and so are your credentials.
Thank you.
Thank you, chairs, for hosting today. I ask, as you said, Martha, clearly how you plan on navigating the whole state. I represent the Utica-Rome area. I have one of the big fives with 52 languages within the school district. So I know you stated that we're basically the same, but really, there is a lot of differences. Transportation is a big issue to us. And the second question is, as you discuss the importance of charter schools, we also know the Educational Choice for Children's Act from the federal level is coming to us to fund private. So it is going to be something that we're going to have to face as a challenge. I just wanted to know your input. And just quickly, as you talk about, it's about different, the future. Can you just say a little bit about where that came from?
Yeah, sure. So we talk a lot about we need to be better, we need to do better, we need to look at scores and have better scores. We need to look at our programs and have better programs. I would submit that we need to have different programs, that the programs that exist in most of our schools are out of the industrial model. It's back from the 50s and 60s, and while some of us are very fond of the 1960s maybe, it's not 1960 anymore, it's not 1970 or 1980 anymore. And so what we really need to be thinking is, how do we do things differently? I see it as a parallel road, and that's what we've done in Baldwin. Our scores have continued to go up. Our graduation rate has gone up. We've managed our finances. We've done all of these new programs really without costing additional money because we've reallocated, because we've updated. And so when I talk about it's about different, it's about thinking to the future. So if I'm from Utica, Rome, for example, and I'm thinking, what are my industries within Utica, Rome? What are my challenges there? How do I navigate those challenges? And you put people in a room together to figure that out. I'll give you one example, which is oh yeah, sure, I'm sorry. Okay, refresh my memory of what the other, oh yeah. Yes, so if there was one benefit to COVID, it was that we all figured out how to communicate with each other virtually. So I think there's lots of opportunities to communicate with superintendents and school districts that way. I think that facilitates things. But I think you visit, there's nothing honestly that makes me happier than going to school districts and talking to our teachers, talking to our kids and just seeing those happy faces. But you also get a sense that way of what the frustrations are, what the challenges are, what's working. And then figuring out, so when you know what's working, if I'm in a rural school district in New York and they have something that's working, we need to make sure we're sharing that with other rural school districts. When we have something working in Queens, we need to make sure that we're sharing that with the Bronx. And so to me, part of it is about building relationships, it's about communication, it's about identifying what the good ideas are out there, and creating the environment that allows that to happen.
Ms. Cami, thank you very much for coming here today. I think we were all quite impressed with what we've heard. We just happened to share with graduates of the District 75 program. That's where I started out
Oh, is that
myself in
right?
New York. What was the nature of the disability?
So I was in Jim Thorpe, PS 370. I was the first and only female teacher in that building.
Okay, and the
I
nature
should
of
get a
your
badge
children?
of honor for that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
The nature of the handicapping condition?
Emotionally, in the city at the time, they called it emotionally disturbed.
Emotionally disturbed, right. I
So-
understand. A very difficult
My kids were out of jail in
assignment, that's for
psychiatric
sure.
center. So I
Okay.
get to share with my kids, yes, I have been to Rikers Island.
Listen, we thank you very much for traveling up to Albany, presenting yourself to us. We're impressed with your, by everything you told us here today, and we appreciate you putting forward. We will let you know, hopefully within the next week or so, what we've decided today, okay?
Right,
And
thank
in the
you.
meantime, safe travel back to Long Island.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Stay warm.
Ms. Evelyn Liu,
Yes, good morning.
welcome. Please sit down, relax. I'm Assemblyman Michael Benedetto, and I am chairperson of the New York State Assembly Education Committee. Sitting with me here at the table, okay, on my right is my colleague, Assemblywoman Alicia Hyman, who is the chairperson of the Higher Education Committee. Next to her are colleagues, Assemblywoman Buttonshone and Senator Bino. And on my left is the ranker on my committee, on the Education Committee, Assemblyman Smith. Okay? We're here to listen to you. We want you to relax and just begin by telling us about yourself briefly and why you want to join the Regents and maybe what are your qualifications for that or what you see. And then after you're finished, we'll ask you a few questions, okay?
Sure.
Good.
Thank
The
you so
floor
much
is yours.
for the opportunity to be here. Just a quick question. I noticed in the cameras, is this streamed?
Yes.
Oh, I was not aware of that. Okay, I was encouraged to apply on Friday, so I maybe missed some information. But anyway, thank you so much for this opportunity to be here today. I was asked to provide a statement with my interests and what I hope to accomplish as regent. I think I would bring a valuable point of view. I'm not a career educator or administrator. The depth of my experience comes from the receiving end of education in New York. I care about the system because I'm the product of it. Born and raised here, educated in public schools, a specialized high school, Columbia, and CUNY. My entire education has been in this state. And now, most importantly, I'm the parent of 2 young children in New York who both have IEPs and very different strengths and challenges. As a result, I'm intimately aware of what it means to navigate special education through both public and private schools. That perspective changes how you see policy. Special education is not an abstract category to me. It's daily life, meetings and evaluations, progress and setbacks, and the constant effort to translate well-intentioned rules into real support for real children. Given that experience, I chose to center my work around my children and my community. I've served on a school leadership team as co-president of a parent association, and I've worked with administrators and legislators on policy. I've engaged in advocacy at every level of government because I care deeply about the system and the millions that it serves. I believe lived special education experience as a parent is an important lens for the Board of Regents. Large systems are designed to standardize, but neurodiversity by definition does not fit the norm. My goal as regent would be to help this large system become more flexible, more capable of personalization, so that students with disabilities, English learners, and any child who learns differently can truly access what policy promises. I'm especially committed to students who are most often underestimated. My recent advocacy has focused on non-speaking autistic individuals and their right to communication and higher expectations. If elected, I would bring that same focus on the most marginalized. Because when a system can work for them, it works better for everyone, and I really believe that. That said, there are big changes afoot. Beyond the shifting federal environment, the future is what keeps me up at night. Education is being reshaped by artificial intelligence. It's not about whether AI will affect our students. It already has. I think we're all keenly aware of that. But the question is, how do you translate this awareness into thoughtful education planning? As regent, I hope to shape this issue, which I believe is going to be the most pressing issue for this generation of learners. You and I, legislators, the regents, academics, we've already found our footing, fulfilling work and our place in society. I'm worried about our children and their children. Education has always been about two things: forming thoughtful, civically minded people and preparing them for a livelihood. Both are being challenged by AI. Social media, screen addiction, and shrinking attention spans. How do we harness the best of technology in classrooms without letting the worst of it run amok? Teachers tell me their biggest barrier is bandwidth. We can use technology to return time to teaching through better tools, modular schedules, and smarter personalization. The goal is to have a more adaptive environment overall. The regions also oversee more than 50 licensed professions. AI is reshaping those fields. Knowledge-heavy work like accounting and law will shrink, while occupations grounded in human presence and physical skill, like occupational therapy, physical therapy, nursing, and teaching, may grow. The board will need to think ahead about what pathways we encourage and how to future-proof job skills as best we can. It's a tall order, but it starts with a serious intention. Above all, I would bring a forward-looking voice. The students in our classrooms will live in a world none of us fully recognize yet. My commitment would be to help this remarkable system adapt, honoring what works, being honest about what doesn't, and keeping real children and families at the center. I would bring a current parent perspective, a commitment to students with disabilities, and a thoughtful approach to technology that would complement this board. I would be honored to serve. Thank you.
Ms. Liu, thank you. And I want to recognize that we have been joined at the table by Assemblywoman Grace Lee. Not that you're really going to have a voice in it, but I'd be interested in hearing your opinions because you served on the school leadership teams and so on. School governance is coming up again. Any views on school governance that you would maybe want to inform us about? Your opinions? Should it stay in the mayor in charge, or should there be some adaptations to it?
I think that the mayor should be in charge. I think that it's always, at least in the case of New York City, it's beneficial to know who the leader is, to know where the buck stops, and to have a single person be accountable so that the leadership is clear.
And right now, there's a whole infrastructure for school governance there, and inclusive of so many different people. Do you think parental voice is adequate as it stands right now?
I think that parental voice, particularly as it pertains to special education and kids with disabilities, have quite a bit to be desired. And I think that's where I see an opportunity for me to be that voice on the Board of Regents. The first thing I did when I was presented with this opportunity was to take a look at the current regents to see what my cohort would be. And I looked through their bios, and there's a real deep wealth of experience there. But I was surprised to see that not a single person was a parent of a special needs student currently in the system. And I think that is a lived experience that that I would bring, and I can speak at length to the issues that I've faced as a parent with two kids with IEPs. But I think, as a regent, it's not a place to complain about problems. It's a place where I can help shepherd better solutions.
Understood. Points well taken. You may want to recheck because Regent Sia from Staten Island.
Okay.
Is a acknowledged
Sorry,
advocate. But at any rate,
yeah, it was really what was presented in the bios.
yes,
so
no problem.
Who knows,
Okay,
right?
but however, let me pass this over to my colleague, Alicia Heineman.
Hi, Ms. Liu. Being on the Board of Regents, you'd have insight into more than 7,000 public and private elementary and secondary schools in the state of New York, over 250 public and private colleges, 251 proprietary schools, nearly 7,000 libraries. That is how much a regent has the ability to influence, especially what happens in the state of New York. This body is made up of individuals who meet and go all over the state with meetings and so forth. So my question to you is, with your background, SLTs, I'm a PTA mom, still am a PTA mom. I wouldn't be in this position if I didn't have the experiences of dealing with public schools. Can you say what would you talked about special education, but a blanket approach is asking you, what do you think are the priorities, or what should the priorities be of a member of the Regents, and what would the three top priorities for you if you were to become a Regent, dealing with all of what I've just told you, what would be the priorities as a Regent if you were selected? Thank you.
Sure. I really see that the primary goal and what keeps me up at night is the future. I think education is being shaped by AI, and there is no realistic way to get in front of it, but it's changing the entire landscape of jobs. And why does anyone get an education if not to make sure that they have skills to provide for themselves and their families in the future? And I think that's not a conversation that I've been seeing, and I would also hope to steer the board and the department towards coming up with meaningful solutions to try to future-proof these skills.
Franca Smith.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for your interest. What do you believe, beyond what's on the Regents' website, what do you believe the role of the Regents is in education policy in the state of New York, and what committees would you want to serve on if elected?
So I think of Regents as, it's really a fancy title, Regents. Think like, cap and gown. But I see them as being trustees, like trustees of the system, right? They're really the ones to set the tone and the objectives for the short term and the long term. It's not granular. I know that, and I don't think it should be. I think that local control or the ability for schools to adapt in their geographies
So is there something the State Education Department and the Board of Regents are working on right now that you'd be most excited to participate in? Because they're working on a number of projects. Mm-hmm. What's something that they're working on that you'd be excited to participate in?
Well, looking at the committees, I think the P12 committee, the disability special, I think it's called is it the special education or disability committee? There's I forget exactly what it's called. Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, but just to understand, like I said, I'm not I don't understand the ins and outs. I don't know what the org chart looks like. And I did do a kind of preliminary look at at the website, and I have an understanding of what the role is. And I think I have a different perspective coming from a
I appreciate that, and I apologize, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I do think you could add a valuable insight as a parent, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, let me see if Ms. Lee has something to add.
Thank you, Ms. Liu, for being here. We appreciate your time. I'd like to dig further into your experience. You've done a lot of advocacy work around legislation up in Albany, and maybe you could speak to, for instance, your engagement with the Adult Survivors Act, which you listed on your resume, as well as some of the additional education policy that you've been very involved with.
Sure, sure. And this, this is more of my experience. Since I haven't done, I'm not an educator or an administrator, but I know what it means to solve problems through policy by working with legislators over the last several years. And I'm very proud of the Adult Survivors Act. It was a historic bill. I was one of the lead advocates, and I worked on it for several years. And it's still, yeah, I'm very proud of that. But what I would like to talk about more is the Communication Bill of Rights for people with disabilities. That's what I'm working on currently with Assemblymember Santa Barbara. It was passed unanimously in the Assembly, so thank you, members. And now we're working on it in the Senate. And this is driven by non-speaking advocates who have really been underestimated. And there's a method of communication called typing that they engage in, and it opens them up to communication that they've never had access to before. And so if you can imagine what it means to be trapped in your body without any means of communication, sometimes for decades, and then be offered an opportunity to use this method and finally share your thoughts, your dreams, your hopes, your aspirations, and then being denied access to this communication. So I've been very animated about helping families and individuals gain access to that. So that's what I've been working on currently.
Ms. Buttonchone.
Thank you for your interest and your passion. You can tell that it clearly comes from your heart, and I appreciate that. My question is one that I ask all the candidates. I'm from the Utica-Rome area, and as an added large member, you will have to travel across the state to get to see the different aspects of each one of the districts. As the chair highlighted how many students that you would help support. Can you tell me how you feel that you could do that, and are you excited to do that?
I'm sorry, can you read that?
To travel across the state so that you could visit.
Oh, absolutely. I've crisscrossed the country actually, and I've visited different school systems. And personally, I live in Manhattan, but I spend a lot of time upstate. I spent and lived for a period in Long Island, and I appreciate all of New York, and I would love traveling to Albany. I do appreciate different parts of New York, and there are differences between the different geographies, which is why I think, again, like it's so important that we have principles, being able to adapt the policies that the board the board creates it at that level. Yes, so.
I'm happy to announce that we've been joined by one of our co-chairs here, Chairman of the Senate Education Committee, Senator Shelley Mayer, and Senator Mayer. We are interviewing Evelyn Liu who comes from Manhattan and comes with some good credentials. And I know you just walked in, but might you have a question that you may want to ask?
Very briefly, and I apologize, too many things going on at once, but thank you for being here.
Yeah.
In the SLT, what school were you involved with there at the school leadership team?
Yes,
Which
Was it-
schools in Manhattan?
Public School 75.
Oh, 75.
Yeah.
Okay,
on the
thank you.
Upper West Side, yes.
And are your children or child still in the New York City public school system?
No, we left about last year, and it was class size. So it was a conversation that I had with the teachers, and it was kind of devastating to leave. My community is still there. We still do our play dates there. They're some of my closest friends. I was deeply involved, but he needed a smaller classroom. And I wasn't sure when that was going to happen, even though there's a mandate.
Yes, we passed it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And Assemblywoman Griffin.
With us today. I appreciate your advocacy efforts for students with disabilities. I think that's very important. I have like a two-question, two questions for you. One, I represent 8021, which is on Long Island. And Long Island schools are really suffering from the really difficult challenges of special ed costs, insurance, construction, transportation. And one of the most, the most exasperating is the way funding is set up in the suburbs for charter schools. So it's the taxpayers of Long Island, or probably anywhere, were never asked. Each district pays taxes to the school district, and no one ever asked us, asked the residents of Long Island, do you want the money that you pay in your school tax, do you want that to fund charter schools? And no one asked us, but now we have many districts, I represent many districts where millions of dollars are being diverted from each school district to go to these charter schools across Long Island. And many areas of Long Island are being targeted. So the cost I would like to know the most about how would you, as a regent, how would you suggest we deal with these escalating costs? You won't have time for everything, but really focused on the charter schools.
So I would try to find out who the decision maker is in that, and how do you change that? Like, how does that change? If taxpayers, if the residents don't want this, to pay this particular tax, who's making that decision? Like, who, and how can you change it? Because if most of the residents are not in favor of a type of taxation, I would assume you can take that up with the local municipality. And so that's one, that's one way to approach it. And secondarily, I would say how to decrease costs. I've thought about this a little bit in our situation. I think we should be looking at private insurance. So a lot of services can be covered by private insurance. And so how do we identify those families and those students who have private insurance who can help shoulder those costs, and maybe make some services reimbursable to some degree, but not surpass what the cost is in taxation, as a whole. So that would be an idea to look into.
Okay, thank you. We're out of time.
Yeah.
Ms. Liu, I thank you very much for being here. You have traveled from New York City up to Albany, and the conditions are not what we call ideal, but you have made it, and we appreciate your interest in serving on the board. I think everybody here, and I can't speak to everybody on the board, but I'll be foolish to say that we're not impressed. You made a nice presentation. We will let you know, hopefully within the next week, 10 days or so, of what we decided up here. But we thank you for your interest. Thank you for coming up here. And hopefully you travel safely going back.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye now.
Good morning.
Mr. Baldwin, thank you very much for coming here today.
Be here.
We appreciate you coming, and I know you had some time concerns, and I'm glad that they were worked out. Okay.
Well, I know Assemblyman McDonald was here, and he wanted to be here while I was here, and he ended up getting called to a committee meeting.
He is a promoter. He's talked to me. Listen, I'm Assemblyman Mike Benedetto. I'm chairman of the Education Committee of the Assembly. On my right and going down the table, we have chairperson of the Higher Ed Committee, Assemblywoman Alicia Heineman. We have the Senate side, chaired by the chairman of their Education Committee, Senator Shelley Mayer. And we have, at the end of the table, Assemblywoman Grace Lee. To my left, we have the ranker on the Assembly Education Committee, Assemblyman Doug Smith. So the whole procedure here is you have a little time here to tell us a little bit about yourself, why you think you would like to be on the Regents, maybe share some opinions about that with us. And then afterwards, we'll take the floor and ask you a few questions, okay?
Great. Thank you
Okay,
very
so
much.
now the floor is yours.
It's great to be back, to see democracy in action out there. Good morning. I'm James Baldwin. I have been privileged to serve as a member of my local Board of Education, school attorney, BOCES district superintendent, college president, and the senior deputy commissioner of education. My career in public service extends back to being a member of the staff of the New York State Assembly a long time ago, and serving as the executive deputy secretary of state for the state from 1983 through 94. And in all those roles, my North Star has been to elevate a service ethic, to put students, the public interest, our customers, and our stakeholders first. The legislature entrusts the Board of Regents with leadership and oversight of New York's vast educational enterprise. For me, to be a regent is to be a fiduciary for the people of our state and their representatives in the legislature. With it comes an obligation to uphold the law and the best values of our state and our country, and to put students first. And in order to put those students first, we need to treat our teachers and our educational leaders with a level of professionalism that they are entitled. The development of a portrait of a graduate in connection with new requirements for earning a high school diploma, led by Commissioner Rosa, promises to transform K through 12 education. Recognizing that all students, every student, possesses competencies, and that our educational institutions must meet them where they are to help them identify those competencies and to develop them. To better engage them in learning and to provide all of them with opportunities for success. Success that is measured not by a single standardized assessment, but by multiple measures. A radically transforming landscape in higher education compels us to anticipate the challenges these vital institutions are facing and to work with them to support their sustenance and provide the flexibility for them to expand their reach here in New York and beyond. Similarly, the professions we license will continue to change as technological advances offer different ways of providing professional services. This creates opportunities to uphold the highest professional standards and to explore levels of regulatory flexibility and approaches that enables them to sustain and grow their practice. Our museums and libraries are critical to achieving a well-informed and educated population. Investments by the governor and the legislature and the New York State Museum signal a strong commitment to our cultural institutions and a welcome and exciting redevelopment of that extraordinary institution, which I often visited as a child growing up a few blocks away from here in the south end of Albany. Developments on the national scene are creating significant challenges. Funding reductions will seriously impact us, and any attempts to threaten the historical construct of New York's governance of its educational and cultural institutions that protects the integrity of these institutions must be vigorously resisted. If I'm privileged to be a member of the Board of Regents, I'll work to ensure that New York will persist in its core commitment to accessibility for our wonderfully diverse student populations, persist in our commitment to equity for those students, and persist in our commitment to expanding opportunity for all through the University of the State of New York. I am happy to answer any of your questions and look forward to our conversation.
Mr. Baldwin, we thank you very much. What can be said? Your knowledge of how the board functions and so on, it makes you highly qualified to be a member of this board. I'm quite impressed with you, and I'm sure the others will have some questions, though, for you. So let us see about Assemblywoman Alicia Hyman.
Dr. Baldwin, you have a very impressive resume, and I think I've seen a lot of candidates, and I'm honored that you chose to interview for this free job with New York State. And so your background is very heavy in higher education, and being that I'm the higher ed chair, I just have a quick question about as we move through this budget that the governor has given us, and because you have this background, especially because you were president at Excelsior College, when it comes to the professions, particularly nursing, allied health, the governor, we started the CUNY and SUNY Reconnect program, opportunity program for those who don't have college degrees to go back and get the associate degree. The governor, in her proposal this year, made it so that if someone already had a degree, they could go back and get a nursing degree because it's a shortage area. Being that you are a college president and understanding how students have to be ready to live and work in the state of New York, can you just give a little insight of what you think other allied health professions are that are growing in the state of New York, and anything that we should be looking towards making sure that as a state we make sure we keep New Yorkers in New York, especially in the allied health professions?
Sure. First of all, I think the importance of any programs that are going to encourage folks to become registered nurses really cannot be overstated. We know that our hospitals and our doctors' offices are really facing a crisis when it comes to recruitment and retention of registered nurses. When we look at physicians' assistants, they play an increasingly important role in the provision of our health services, and I believe that that's an area where while the demands and the expense associated with going to medical school are a bit less, I think anything we can do as a Board of Regents and as a state to encourage and to support people who are interested in those paths is critically important. At the K-12 level, we have a number of programs that are designed to create career pathways for our students. Among them are LPN programs that then enable students to become a licensed practical nurse, gain experience, and then move into a nursing program and become a registered nurse. There are any number of programs now operating in our BOCES and some of our school districts that create those kinds of opportunities for students to explore what it's like to work in the health professions and also to be aware of the many different hats that one can wear in the workplace with degrees related to healthcare and health sciences.
Thank you.
Senator Mayer.
Good to see you.
Good to see you again, Senator.
So first, I have two questions. One is about the teacher pipeline in terms of encouraging young people to be teachers and particularly more diversity among our teacher population. Do you have specific ideas of how, if you were on the Regents, you could propose ideas that would be effective in increasing the number of teachers we have? We're facing a shortage.
Yes. Well, first of all, I would use as a model a program that was created at the Questar 3 BOCES, which I was once superintendent of, which basically creates an opportunity for students to work in a New Visions program, to do career exploration of teaching in their senior year, and that then enables them to first understand what teaching is. A lot of people have an image of teaching that may not be accurate. It gives them an opportunity to do some career exploration, and it encourages those who have the interest to then move into teacher education programs. I also think that we need to be looking at multiple paths to teacher certification. I took an unorthodox path into education. I received an exceptional certification to become a district leader and to become the district superintendent of Questar 3, having been an attorney before that. So to me, one of the great possibilities is that we look at those bridges that can be built between people who currently are in other careers and who want to become teachers. There are many qualified people in any number of different careers. I think during my time at the State Education Department, we made some significant progress in terms of breaking down some of those barriers, but ensuring that we had prepared teachers coming out of that pipeline. I think we need to do more of that. The teacher certification system in New York is actually quite Byzantine.
Yes, it is.
And what we need to be doing is really taking a look at what are the basic requirements for entry into the classroom. Treat that as the beginning of learning in a profession. It isn't like it's the end of learning. It needs to be treated as part of the learning and the beginning of the learning journey. That requires us to focus on how we're going to support our teachers more effectively as they begin their practice and as they continue their practice in teaching. It will also help us, I think, to focus on teacher retention, because one of our great challenges, in addition to recruitment, is retention.
Can I ask you, this is sort of a blunt question, but I think it needs to be asked. So, as you know, better than probably anyone who's come before us, the Board of Regents is independent of the State Education Department, independent of the Commissioner, and is viewed by me and I think my colleagues as needing to have truly an independent voice, willing to disagree with the staff of the State Education Department, willing to disagree with the Commissioner. Bring an outsider's perspective. You have been an insider, and you've been an outsider. So question, how do you reassure us, and not in a critical way, but just in a legitimate policy way, that on the Board of Regents, you would be sort of free of your sort of inside experience and come at it with your own very lengthy experience outside of the department? Because all these departments have culture, they have habits, and I think it's important to us that there be an independent voice.
Well, in any position that I've held, I was in a position where I was appointed by a governor's office. I spent 12 years in that position.
Yeah, I saw.
And I can tell you, you can talk to any of those people who were around at the time. I maintained my independence, both in terms of relationships with that governor's office and relationships with the Secretary of State. I had the really pleasure of working with Commissioner Rosa at the end of my formal career. And I will tell you, she and I had some very vigorous debates on certain issues. And I have no qualms about expressing my views, if they happen to conflict with others. I am driven by a public service ethic and values that really transcend any position that I've ever held.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that answer.
Rankin Doug Smith.
Thank you, and thank you for offering to be a candidate for this position. To dovetail off the last question, maybe the flip side of the coin, what in your service in the State Education Department would you think of something that you were instrumentally involved with, something that the State Education Department is doing, maybe two sides particularly well, and what could we be doing better, having that intimate?
Sure. Let's go back. I came into the position during the height of the COVID pandemic. My first day there, I was one of the few people in the building. So I knew that the commissioner had a commitment to changing the relationship between the department and the field. It is no mystery, secret, that the department had, adversarial relationships in the field that were really unnecessary and that weren't productive. So that is what really drew me to come into the position after my second retirement. And we did that. We changed the relationship between the State Education Department and the field. We also changed not only K-12, we changed the relationship with higher ed. Wasn't in my domain at State Ed, but I know there were efforts to change the relationship with the professions. In my experience, customer service is what this is all about. We exist. We exist as a department, and I used to tell people this, because we have kids out there that need to be educated. We have people out there who need to get certified as teachers. And we have professionals out there who are depending on us for a license in a timely fashion. Customer service ethic, I think, has permeated, and you cannot give up on it. You have to be persistent. You have to look at ways to make it part of the system and part of the culture. And I think we started in that direction, and I think the commissioner and her
I tend to agree with that assessment. I think that there was that adversarial. You mentioned, and I'm running low on time, you mentioned teacher certification. I think that's so important what you're talking about, because would you agree that there's two sides of this? Someone who can deliver information effectively and someone with content, knowledge, and depth and breadth. And obviously we want a good candidate would be someone who had both for being a teacher in the classroom. Can you speak a little bit more to that? Like your thoughts of taking people maybe as a second career to be an educator, because I think that could be a wealth of.
Sure. We did while I was there, and some of this work, I believe much of it is continued, is really to look at, okay, if you have a bachelor's degree, what do you need in order to earn certification? The requirements in terms of the number of credits and where those credits reside have been transformed and changed to enable people to more readily move from one career into the teaching career. We've explored how the nature of teaching needs to reflect the changes that have happened in our society and in our culture more generally. They also need to reflect changing educational standards. You asked me about where I thought I could have done better. One of the things I discovered is that teacher preparation programs, we've sort of taken for granted that when the standards change, that they change teacher preparation programs. And they don't. Some of them do, but some of them don't. And I believe that we need to pay closer attention to that nexus between what the learning standards are. And the Portrait of a Graduate is going to transform learning in this state. In order for that to happen, passing a policy, passing a law isn't going to get it done. We need to be looking more deeply at the levers that we need to be pressing in order to transform the system to be hospitable and to welcome the changes that are coming.
Thank you. I agree.
Assemblyman McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Benedetto. Jim, it's good to see you. Thank you for your submittal. I've known you a long period of time, probably a good 20, 25 years, and when I look at your career, although it's not long, it's experienced on many different aspects of education. And you and I discussed a couple different topics. One area that I always have an interest in, of course, is the importance of making sure the professions are able to operate at their highest opportunity. And that's a benefit not only for those who have paid for that education, but more importantly, for those people we're going to collect income tax from too as well. Sometimes I think our state scope is so tight that some younger, energized folks will move out of state to practice the profession at a higher level. What's that? Well, it's not always just about K-12, although that's important. One thing we didn't talk about, and I wanted to get your perspective on, it's an issue myself and members of the Capital Region have a concern about, and I think it's an issue statewide too, student absenteeism. And I'm wise enough to know that you can't just lay that at the feet of the principal or the superintendent of each district. In your experience, where can we do better in regards to, is it collaboration? Is it a different approach? What is part of the solution to what is, to me, a confounding problem? We spend a lot of money on education. We want to make sure our kids have opportunity for a good education, but also a good career. What can we do better?
I think that what it really comes down to is how effectively are we engaging students in the learning environment. And that is why when I was a district superintendent and the charter school movement was starting, we decided we were going to create a public school that was going to effectively engage students in project-based learning, using technology as a foundation for that experience. It's called Tech Valley High School. It's been in existence now for 20-some years. And what we find there is that because we are engaging students in learning activities every single day, in projects that emulate what happens in a workforce, that we are seeing the success of those students. We have a relatively high percentage of students with IEPs in that learning environment and in our CTE learning environments, and the data demonstrates very clearly that they attend because they like what they're doing. They may be working with their hands, they may be working on a computer. They're engaged in learning in a way that helps them recognize their competencies. I talked about competencies in the beginning of in my statement, and you know, one of the most incredible experiences that I have had is talking to career tech ed students in our ed centers who had spent up to their junior year in school feeling like they had no competencies, feeling like they couldn't learn, and them telling me that when they got into the Career Tech Ed Center, they started to understand. They understood math in the context of that. They understood English in the context of that. That they had to wait till they were juniors in high school is unacceptable. So for me, it is really about engagement. You know, you can force kids to come to school, but if they are not going to check in, we're not going to make progress with them. To me, the other thing is this. You know, we're all, I mean, I'll speak for myself. I've been around a while. And, you know, I went to a Catholic school, as elementary school. And, you know, we were very dutiful kind of, you know, conformist students. I mean, we went in, we had our uniforms on, we sat down, we paid attention. We had 3 TV stations. You know, we had a Victrola at home. We're in a different era here. And I have to tell you that, you know, I have gone into high school classes, and if I closed my eyes, I would feel like I was back there, back in, you know, the 1950s, 60s, 70s, whatever it was. That, to me, is the biggest challenge we face, because we have kids who grow up in this extraordinarily stimulating environment, and it's only going to get more so. And if we don't do the work that is suggested by the Blue Ribbon Commission and we don't make those changes, I don't think it's going to get better. I think we're going to have more and more of a problem. It's about student engagement. It's not about just saying, here, this is the plain vanilla we're going to offer you, because we've always done it that way. We have to treat our students like customers who we need to engage.
We have been rejoined at the table by Assemblywoman Griffin. Do you have a question you want to ask? Go right ahead.
Escalating costs that are really hard to get a hold of. So construction, special ed costs, transportation, insurance. But there is no cost worse than the rising costs of charter schools on Long Island. And the way they're funded by the taxpayers of each school district. And you might have a real insight to this because you have experience, you were at SUNY. So, they get approved by state ed or by SUNY, and SUNY does a lot more approving of the charter schools. And what's happening in the school districts I represent, some of them are hemorrhaging because millions and millions of dollars are leaving the school district and going out to these charter schools. And then some districts are just starting to bleed, so the bleeding will continue. And I've been in office since 2019, and this problem just gets worse. So that, to me, is the biggest issue I would like to see what a potential regent what guidance or what advice, or how do you think this should be handled?
Sure. So I think the Board of Regents is required to act within the law. And currently, the law of the state of New York provides for the chartering of charter schools. So, as my work at the department, which has a charter school office, and, those folks who wanted to be chartered by the Board of Regents would come in, and there was a really very thorough examination of what they proposed to do, the resources they had to do it, and so on and so forth. You have other chartering institutions, SUNY being one of them. I think Buffalo and New York City are also chartering institutions. So, for me, the threshold issue is the legislature and the governor has created a system that allows for the creation of charter schools and set up a system to fund them. My reaction to charter schools when I was a district superintendent was to marshal my superintendents in the region and to create Tech Valley High School, because you know what? Charter schools were created because, people argued that there wasn't enough choice in the public education system. Well, we said, okay, we're going to create more choice. So we did it. We expanded our CTE programs. We expanded our New Visions programs. Ultimately, it really comes down to the will of the governor and the legislature in terms of the future of charter schools and the way that they're funded. As a regent, we can advocate, but we, as a regent, as a department, are required by law to do what we do and to exercise our best judgment as applications for permission to operate as a charter come in.
Thank you.
Mr. Baldwin, thank you for being here today. I think we have exhausted our questions right now, and you have answered them in great detail, and I'm sure have impressed everybody for being here. You seem to be an outstanding candidate for this office. But who knows what's going to happen? And we'll let you know in another week. You know how the legislature works, okay? But we won't hold you on the edge for forever, and hopefully within the week, 10 days, we'll let you know. But thank you for presenting.
Thank you so much,
to us.
and it's really been a joy and a privilege to be able to sit here with you and discuss this. So thank you.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Ms. Scott, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. I am Assemblyman Mike Benedetto. I'm head of the chairperson of the Assembly Education Committee. Sitting with me at the table here, on my immediate right, is our head, our chairperson of the Higher Education Committee, Assemblywoman Alicia Hyman. Okay, and sitting next to her are two Assembly ladies, Assemblywoman Grace Lee and Assemblywoman Judy Griffin. Okay, to my immediate left is my ranker on the Education Committee in the Assembly, Assemblyman Doug Smith. And we're here just to find out a little bit about you. We're going to ask you to spend a little time telling us about yourself and your qualifications and what your ideas are on the regions. After which, we'll ask you a couple questions, okay, that might be in our mind. Okay, so I want you just to relax and just have a nice conversation with us. And the floor is now yours, ma'am. Go.
Did I press it off? Can you hear me? It was already on, okay. In preparation of this, I jot down a couple of things. So one thing I didn't do was turn off my notifications. Hold on just a second. First off, I want to say good afternoon and thank you for the opportunity. Excuse my voice, I'm battling a cold. I'm in denial, so for right now, I'm pretending this is my normal voice. Okay, I'm bringing over a decade of experience in public service, spanning education, advocacy, compliance, regulatory compliance, and governance support. Throughout my career, I've worked in intersection of policy and practice, supporting programs that require strong oversight, adherence to state standards, and it's a clear commitment to equity and accountability. My professional background includes significant experience with compliance management, monitoring, reporting, and multidisciplinary coordination and engagement with government agencies and mandated systems. I understand the importance of transparency and governance, data-informed decision-making, and safeguarding the integrity of educational and credentialing institutions that serve diverse communities across New York State. While much of my current work has been focused on mental health and the workforce development, it has reinforced my belief that education, formal, professional, and vocational, is fundamental to individual opportunity and public trust. My approach is a balance with compassion and structure and mission-driven values with statutory responsibilities. I would be honored to contribute my experience, judgment, and commitment, ethics, oversight, and service to this board responsibilities to the people of New York. You're welcome.
Ms. Scott, thank you very much for being up here. Let me ask you this. You're from New York City?
I'm from New York City, born and raised.
And you've served on some of the CECs?
Yes.
I noticed. Okay. Not that you're going to have a vote on this, but I'll be interested in hearing your opinion about mayoral control, about the setup of mayoral control, how well it functions, and possibly should there be improvements, or should we have it at all? Go ahead, tell us. Tell me.
Well, interesting enough, I also co-chair in my daughter's elementary school an advocacy group committee. And we just had a meeting focused on mayoral control. And what I would like to say, with everything, there needs to be a balance. much like how the Regents was developed in order to take away, like, be liaisons between politics and education. I think that sort of same framework should be done with marital control. There are good things about marital control, but there are a lot of things that were moved away from parents in school and education, and it became more of the word control fits. It was more of a control of what people do, think, and how everything was run without any real insight or power to the parents. I think that's something that can be addressed.
You want more parental control,
I would want more parental control, and not just control, but
input.
yes. Our input needs to have more teeth. It can't be just us spending our days and nights talking about things that will never change, especially when it comes to budgeting projects with a capital plans with SCA, sorry. So things like that. But I would like to see a revamping of what is already existence, and where there's governance and accountability, and as well as parents having the ability to have a voice that strikes movement and reframes some of the things that we find to be not great for our kids.
Understood. Thank you. Assemblywoman Hyndman.
Ms. Scott, as a former CEC mom, president for many years, congratulations for taking the challenge and stepping up and doing this interview today. Part of being a region is there are about 7,000 public and private schools in the state of New York, over 250 public and private colleges, about over 250 proprietary schools, libraries. It's a tremendous task being in the body, being a regent, and there are a myriad of issues that will be brought before you as a region, and it's particularly for the K-12 education sector. What do you think are the top 3 issues that are facing education in the state of New York, and not just obviously the 5 boroughs, but the 62 counties that we have in the state of New York? What do you think are the top 3 issues that are facing students in the classroom?
Well, one of the issues that I feel strongly about, and was an advocate for, and also co-sponsored a resolution with the CEC, is gun violence. I do believe that there is a lot more to be done. Children are not going to be able to learn if they don't feel safe. And as well as, and this is from K to college, everywhere, all children, everyone in an educational institution has that fear of violence. So I think that, for me, that would be number 1. 2 would be, and I'm thinking overall and not just in New York City, 2 would be having more policy legislation opportunities with AI. I do see that there's a lot. I see legislation that is more towards the employment and development and the educational parts, mainly on how children use it, but there is not much on the development on curriculum for it. As we grow as a state, there's a lot of tech companies within our state that look to hire people, and 9 times out of 10 is outside of New York. I think it's an opportunity for us to build economically, as well as garner more opportunities for our children. So that would be number 2 for me, as far as thinking statewide. And 3 would be affordability to higher learning. And I say that because as I go to different meetings and talk to different folks, there's always been, we have these great plans, there's legislation in place for more teachers and school psychologists and licensed social workers. However, they can't find any. I believe one of the reasons why we can't find any is because the cost of education is so high that people tend to go to work for things that they can start to make a living off of and not be able to see or have the opportunity to think of living in debt and what that looks like and be able to prepare for your family. So having student costs lowered, I think would help with the gap of having teachers in schools, especially with the class mandate, and we need more teachers. Having more of an opportunity for more people to go into the professions that are needed for our schools.
Thank you. Mr. Smith?
Thank you, and thank you for joining us today. So I like a lot of things that you just talked about, making sure people can access higher education to enter fields that we need. I see you have a background in counseling. The importance you mentioned of school safety and security, but also the mental health component. Can you speak to that? Because as I travel my district, this is a recurring theme in our schools that we need to make sure our children have those supports that they need.
Sure. I would say we're in a new era, especially after COVID. There's been it's been exasperation of mental health concerns with our children, especially with screen time and having all the evidence out about how social media is marketed to our children. So it would take, for me, when I think of mental health, it would take not only just the counseling, but it would we need to take more of a holistic approach, because even with our adults, we tend to rely on social media. I'm just looking at my phone, at my notes. So it would take a holistic approach in order, I think, to really, truly get to the nexus of what the issues are. And a lot of times, even with COVID, it did not only affect our children, our schools, but it affected our adults and families. And not addressing where we are in mental health currently, I think we're remiss, and we're too much looking for a more instant sort of resolution to something that is taking us about 5 years to get to.
That
So
makes
I
sense.
think it's more about getting a holistic view approach.
Now, that kind of dovetails too into, making sure the whole child feels good about themselves and being able to, be a member of society. I see, you served on Community Education Council. What are your thoughts about chronic absenteeism? Because we're finding that across the state of New York, it's as high as, I think the percentage we heard the other day at the hearing was almost 1/4 of students are missing like 18 days of school a year, which that equates to about 10% of the school time. Obviously, kind of easier to impact and help children and help, develop if students show up to school. So what are your thoughts on how we can address that?
Well, currently our district has made great strides in reducing absenteeism. And one of the things that the superintendent did was once again have more of a holistic approach to addressing the issue. And that was the parent coordinators and having other persons, I can't remember who else, but primarily the parent coordinator reaching out to parents. Sometimes it is fear. COVID really put a lot of fear in parents, and so a sniffle is not only just a sniffle anymore. It's more of what could be next, so what else is happening. It could also be that parents and or caregivers who may be grandparents are living with long-standing COVID effects, so they're chronically ill, and those are primarily people that take their children to school. So having more of a holistic approach and understanding what in the family dynamic is missing or needed service or assistance was very helpful. And sometimes just having that phone call and not just the automated response, an email or a text saying that your child is absent, just having that phone call of someone saying, "Are you okay?" does wonders, because then it feels more holistic and the child and the family feels a part of the educational process. And it's not just somewhere you dump your kids.
Thank you.
Assemblywoman Grace Lee.
Thank you for joining us today. In your role in various positions on the CEC, I'm sure you've done a lot of advocacy work for your school district. Can you talk about a particular issue that you've worked on and how you've been able to push it forward or find a resolution to help improve the lives of students in the district?
Sure. I have 2 children. One is 20 and the other is 11. I don't advise it. 2 is not for the weak. So, so it's been a span of things. I started with the CEC with the hopes of gaining more access to dual language within the district. My daughter attended a dual language school, and I found it to be something that I think more children should have access to. So in doing that, I was able to advocate for that, as well as have several meetings with different professors that really gave us more data-driven evidence on why this was a great thing for our children. And since then, we've gained, I think, 2 to 3 more dual language schools within our district. So I was really proud about that. Second was we were able, during that tenure, we were able to receive a grant for equity and inclusion. The DOE was able to try, using my words carefully, the DOE then had the opportunity to desegregate our schools in the district, and I felt really good about that advocacy. We did charrettes, different engagements with the community so that we understood exactly what everyone looked for when they thought of equity and inclusion, as well as what their priorities were, even if it wasn't equity and inclusion. What was it? And we were able to garner something that was something that we could propose to the DOE. And third, I think, was the resolution that I currently sponsored or co-sponsored that was against gun violence in our district. And from that, we now have, well, it was twofold. The drills that are done can sometimes be very traumatizing for children. So what we have in place now is that the principal gives us warning before the drill takes place, and we have the opportunity to opt out our children. And so it gives the parents some say-so on how they would like to address the drills. And as well, it gives some autonomy over the children, because the children came back and said how they felt about the drills. So I think those are the main things.
And to close, Assemblywoman Griffin.
Hello, thank you for being here, and thank you for your willingness to serve our state in such an important area. I'm going to, basically, I've been asking the same question because time is so limited. I represent 12 schools on Long Island. So one part question is, what is your experience, and not necessarily experience, but understanding the funding for programs and school costs that are escalating is very different than the way the city's funded. So what is your, what is your understanding of that? I speak with my superintendents regularly on the severe escalating costs of special ed, transportation, insurance, construction. And, but one issue that they all are experienced at different levels is the infiltration of charter schools. And the way they're funded in suburban schools is money, millions of dollars are diverted from our public schools districts to go to the charter schools. And it just sets up, a really difficult task for public schools, because it hampers them from maybe even bringing in new programs that might address attendance and other things, and bringing in more innovation because so much money is being diverted. So I just wondered, as a regent, what thoughts you have on these topics.
As a regent, I would, and I am really I believe in hearing everything and being unbiased and determining what's best for our children. However, my experience on the CEC is one of advocacy for our public schools, and we also fought back against co-location with charter schools, because we found it to be an unfair advantage that they would have the same amount of funding, no rent, and took away from our children. And not only just that, a lot of their practices cherry-pick some of our higher-performing children, and then leaves the public school to have to bear the burden of funding for those that need further assistance. And so it became a same issue in New York City as you're experiencing in Long Island. And so it resonates to me. And as far as a region, I do believe that parents should have a voice. So there is a place for charter school, how it was originally intended. It was not to cherry pick children. It was to service all. So I believe if they did their fair share, it would help with the budgeting crisis.
Okay, thank you very much.
Ms. Scott, thank you for being here today. I think everybody on the board was quite impressed by your answers, and we're very glad you came. We thank you for taking the time out of your day and your life to come all the way up to Albany, because it's not the best day to travel out there with all the snow and everything. But we're glad you're here and presented to us. We will let you know what we decide fairly shortly. Within the week, 10 days or so, you'll get a call from us. But know that we're impressed, and know that we're also grateful that you're up here. Thank you, and safe travel home.
And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. That formally ends the interviews for the New York State Legislature, having interviews with the regents of the state. We declare it closed.